Hello, everyone. Welcome into the Create Smarter podcast. I'm Tyler Pyron. He's Phil DiMartino. We're from 5 Tool Productions. Thanks so much for tuning in. How are you doing today, Phil?
Doing great, Tyler. Thank you. How are you?
I am very good. I'm especially excited to talk about this topic today, which is why the heck should you live stream?
Yeah.
Or in a lot of cases, why the heck shouldn't you live stream, right?
And when should you?
And when should you? And what type of event should you do it? Because we've been having a lot of these discussions lately because COVID's a thing of the past, right? And during peak COVID season, there was all virtual events.
Right.
As we came out of COVID, we had everybody trying to do hybrid. And a lot of people were rushing to say, we're going to be back in person right now and say, you know what, we don't want to do any of the live streaming. And then some people said, well, I kind of want to. I miss that. I like that part of being able to be there. But then others have said, well, I want everybody on my location under one roof. I don't want people to be live streaming whatsoever. So at what point now, how do you make that decision? Should I live stream this? Shouldn't I? What's the reason I should? How do we make that case at this point in time?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of nuance to it, but I think ultimately what it boils down to is there an appetite for it? Is there an audience for it? You can answer a lot of the other questions later, and I know sometimes the concern is, well, if we live stream, there won't be, as many people who want to show up in person. We can talk about why I think that's a little bit of a myth in a minute, but I think it all really has to start from the common sense question of, if I live stream this, is there an audience with an appetite and ability to watch, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And different event types have a different type of audience. And when you think about, is there an audience, is it big enough to make it worth, your time and investment and what you're programming? And if not, is there one component of your event that has it? It doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing, but I think sometimes people overcomplicate this, and really what it comes down to is a very simple question. Is there an audience that wants to watch this from their phone, from their computer, from their desk at work, or not, right? And if the answer is no, well, move on and think about the next thing and focus on your in-person experience. But if so, think about the best way to serve them that experience, and that's obviously a whole different conversation. But do you agree? That's kind of as simple as that,
it's
right?
kind of what we say for every single video production out there, whether it's a standard shoot and edit, start with your audience, right? Whether it's an event in person, start with your audience. If it's something remote, start with your audience. What do they want? What are they looking for? What's the appetite there for? And then say, okay, I'm going to deliver them that experience. And one of the things I really starting to look at more and more recently is the types of events that they're trending more towards. Don't live stream this or do live stream this. And if you are going to live stream it for that type of event, make it a little bit more interactive and engaging, not just something that at the end of the day, 7 o'clock at night, I'm going to bring up my laptop, my computer, or try to navigate it on my smart TV and try to find something that's maybe a little bit tough to watch and tough to be a part of. Whereas on the flip side, if it's something that's a little bit more educational, something that you can get credits for, I would say live stream that all day long, because people are going to be watching that with a little bit more intent and sitting down and taking notes and trying to study for something. It's almost like taking a class, taking a course. So if you have some of those high level conferences that are very informative, that are a little bit more, like I said, more educational than anything else, I would say lean towards the sides of live streaming that versus maybe an award ceremony. I don't know. I don't even necessarily watch the Grammys, let alone watch a small local award ceremony. So there's different reasons to it.
And I think everything has, its own special circumstances. And I think, you could talk about any specific type of event and make a case for or against. But again, it starts with, do you have the audience? So let's say you're hosting, a gala, right? And that, let's just use round numbers for the sake of argument. 1,000 people really, really want to go and want to see what's happening there, but you only have seats for 100. Maybe there's a case to be made there for live streaming so that you can include those people in some form or fashion, and ideally tap into fundraising and all of that. That said, your live stream for that might not be just a rinse and repeat of your whole program. Maybe it's a special access red carpet show just for donors who are watching from home. Maybe it's a Q&A with someone that they really want to hear from an organization or a VIP or something like that. It might not just be what the people sitting down having their plated dinner in the ballroom get, because that's an experience that's been created and curated for a sit-down audience. It's not to say there's not a relevant experience that could be created for an at-home audience, if there is one that exists. It's a matter of what might that be. So, you mentioned the award ceremony. Well, are there, colleagues and friends and family, international. I'm thinking about, let's say it's awards for a company that has offices, all over the world. Yeah, live stream that, right? So that colleagues, in the Far East and on the West Coast and, in South America or wherever else in the offices, other satellite locations can tune in and see their colleagues and chime in and celebrate them in that way. So everything is dependent on a specific circumstance, but there are some baseline types of events where you might start out by saying, and again, it all goes back to the question of like, what are people going to get when they watch it? And I think that's where people need to start from. And sometimes people's minds are a little bit set on, well, this is the program for the in-person audience, so if we were to stream, that's the only thing we can stream. You don't necessarily need to be limited by that either. There's other types of experiences you can deliver too, again, assuming there's an audience. In another case, let's say you're doing a gala and our demand for this is about 200 people. They're all local. We can seat 220. Probably no need to live stream. Probably focus on the in-person experience and really making that killer for the people who are there, as opposed to focusing on streaming for an audience that maybe doesn't exist.
Well, what is interesting when we talk about audience, I think sometimes folks get wrapped up into audience size as a whole, because when you look at audience size, I mean, you even just started talking about it, right? If it's 1,000 people that might be in person and maybe 400 that are there, you might say that's actually a good number of people. But we've actually had experiences in the stance that there's only about 400 people on location. There's only about 3 people watching remotely, but those 3 people watching remotely are incredibly important, right? So it's the audience of one that we say, well, that's a massive donor, or that is a big sponsor. That's a C-level executive that's here, that's watching his people, paying attention to this. That might be someone from a big financial institution that's watching, that says, oh, I'm going to be investing in this company. I need to make sure I'm watching this, right? So when we look at that and say, it's not always just about quantity, the raw numbers and quantity of people, it's the quality of your audience, right? So we always talk about that audience of one, and it's wildly important. It's the same thing as if you put out a video that's hyper-specific about financial services for the C-level executive for people that live in Greenland, right? There's only a few of those people that are actually out there. But if you're reaching those people, who cares if you only get 3 views? If those 3 views are from those people, that's all you need. That's all you want. So it's important to keep that in mind when you talk about starting with the audience. Well, am I broadcasting this to the masses, or am I trying to get this to a few handful of select people?
Of the right people, yeah. And I think, the gala example, to go back to that one, is a perfect one. Let's say we've got this prospect who's really interested in, in donating, and they're going to be traveling during this event, or they're located on the West Coast and your company's located on the East Coast, and they really want to tune in, and you think that there's a portion of the program that's either going to speak to them directly or would help push them over the edge to make, a donation that would really change the course of your organization. Well, maybe then it's worth it, even if they're literally the only person who tunes in. And I think like the kind of social media rush of the 2000s to 2015 era, when the vanity metrics like likes and views got pumped up so much, kind of screwed with people's heads a little to say, well, if I'm not getting 1 million views, it's not worth it. No, it's all about the right audience. And again, I think you have to look at it from a balanced perspective of, who are the right people. And then there's also sometimes a monetary component as well. You mentioned some of the educational events or the programmatic events. A lot of times there are virtual tickets that you can sell to offset the cost or even make a profit off of it as well, while delivering a good experience to those people, and it's still going to be cheaper for those people than buying plane tickets and hotels and all of that to come in person to an event. So it is a positive for everyone. So again, there's always kind of a balancing act to have here when thinking about pros and cons. But no matter what, if you do start to go down the route of should we stream, it shouldn't just be let's just do exactly what we have in person. There has to be an element of what are we delivering to the at-home audience that's going to make this a good experience and make it worth it for them.
Well, you mentioned it, the portion of the show, right? It doesn't necessarily always have to be, all right, the show on site kicks off at 8:30 in the morning, goes all the way till 5:30 in the afternoon or in the evening. You can say, I'm going to have the in-person experience be from 8:30 in the morning to 5 p.m. at night, and I want the online experience to be from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock or 1:15 to 2, right? And have it just be 45 minutes, be one session, or it's the sidebar conversations. That's one of the things that HubSpot does really well at the inbound conferences. Yes, you can go ahead and pay for the live stream ticket if you want to go ahead and do so, but they also will just live stream their sidebar sessions, almost their interview station, just on Facebook. Go ahead
Right.
and participate. See what you're missing out on and things of that nature. So being strategic with what you're actually streaming for that experience for the online attendee, so that they can have a completely different experience than what you would get on site, because you can't replicate that. It's physically impossible to do so.
Yeah, and I think it's important to, in the example of like a 3-day conference or something like that where you're going for 24 hours, you're much better off thinking about a way to, either once a day or just once over the course of the conference, put together a really, really great, engaging show that's aimed to meet the needs of the virtual audience for 1 hour than doing a half-assed job for 24 hours, right? Putting together a program that's not good for the entire duration of your conference is not what you should be doing. You should be focused on, if we're going to stream, how can we put together a really good product for that audience at home? Don't just treat it as, if you're going to treat it as, we're just doing it because we have to or because we want to, then don't do it, right? You either want to dedicate yourself to doing it right or not doing it at all. And I think that that's an important thing to remember. When you think about those conferences and things like that, sometimes we will go on site and put together a show. You mentioned the HubSpot example. That's a great example where it's like people in person don't even really get that, right? They might be able to hear it on a speaker or something like that, but really that's for the people at home, right? And there's other benefits to putting that content together as well beyond just the live stream. And that's something to keep in mind too. If you're going to do this content, you're also capturing it and you can use it in other ways after the show as well. And so there's an added benefit beyond just that live stream. But of course, the live stream itself does have, a fair amount of setup.
And there's one of those things you could do. We talk about red carpet shows, right? The red carpet show that we actually will film before the actual event takes place and play it in the room to try to get people to migrate into the main room. Why not just say, I'm going to live stream that? Mm-hmm. And the important people that are the VIPs, if you will, that are walking in on the red carpet that might be celebrities or super, super prominent people in that specific industry that we want to go ahead and showcase them and let you have access to them that you might not necessarily have on a regular basis. So like things like that can also, entice your audience to say, well, maybe I don't have to sit down and watch an entire show, but I can gain access to some of these people that I could never have done it even if I was in site, because they're sitting in a different level or different set of tables that I am. But it allows you to go ahead and get maybe a little FaceTime, obviously, from a live stream perspective. But I think by doing that, it creates a different experience for the end user at home.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for you to think about if you're an event organizer or you're going in and debating whether or not to live stream is you do need to know your why in advance, whatever that is, whether it's to reach the one big potential donor or to try to reach, a big audience or to try to sell a lot of tickets to offset costs. You need to know what that objective is going into the event, because otherwise you'll have no idea whether or not you succeeded, right? There's no way to know, was this live streaming worth it or was it successful, unless you go in defining what success is. And I think, if you've ever run an event, it can be, it sounds common sense to say what I'm saying, but it can be easy to just be like, we're just going to do it and figure it out. And then you get after the event and you're like, I don't know, did it work? Did it not? And unless you go in having a clear idea of what you're trying to accomplish, it can be very easy to just have it happen and be like, I don't know, But I think a lot of times, the informational conferences, or like I'm thinking about some that we would do in higher ed that include a lot of really smart people talking about, topics that are important to a wide subset of an audience that's scattered across the globe. Kind of these like informational summits almost,
that
right?
Are hyper-focused for a super passionate crowd as
but
well.
On a specific topic.
And they might not necessarily be here in Boston.
Right. And there's an audience of, we'll go to a room at a university here and there'll be 200 people in a full room, but then there's, 6 times that watching online spread out across the country and across the world, because these are all really smart people and you're getting, content and access from them in a way that you don't often get, right? It's different than reading a paper that they wrote on a scientific topic, being able to watch them present and being able to watch them talk to each other in a panel discussion, and being able, most importantly, to, ask questions of them live. So like there's plenty of times when that virtual audience, completely outpaces the in-person audience, and that's important too. I do also think that we're talking about when to stream your in-person event. I do also think there's an opposite side of this, which is to say, well, when should you not even bother with an in-person event? And when should you just focus on putting together a really, really great virtual-only event, a live-streamed event, which some people have discounted coming out of COVID, but there are times when it's really worth it. We did one recently that was primarily just a virtual event. All the speakers dialed in virtually, and the audience was virtual, and it was super successful. People were primarily watching from work because it was, a topic that was germane to people's work, and they were able to sign on and join in for the sessions that they cared about and ask questions live, and the speakers were able to join from their homes or their offices without traveling to Boston, and in that case, it worked really, really well. And I think just because we can get back in person doesn't mean you necessarily have to. There's a case for it, but you don't have to do it every single time. And we've kind of, as an industry and as a company, I'd like to think, perfected the art of that fully virtual stream. You can use that as a tool if you want to, and it's a lot more cost effective in a lot of ways too, and can be just as effective in terms of delivering your message and connecting with your audience.
It's one of those things that we used to say, think mobile first. Remember, you're like, if you're building a website, you need to think mobile first, right? That was 10, 15 years ago. Now you might be saying, think virtual first for your event, and then work backwards from there.
Right. Do we need an in-person component? And I think there's almost this rubber band effect coming out of COVID where the assumption is, there's going to be in person. Should there be? You should ask that question about your in-person event the same way you should about your virtual event, right? If you can do it all virtually and the experience is going to be great and people are going to save money and think more favorably of you and have a great time, do it.
Well, you just said it, the money portion of it. A lot of times we'll have people ask us and say, we're going to cut the virtual component of it because it just costs so much.
It doesn't cost even what your catering bill costs.
If you said, I'm going to do this specifically just virtually and not do it in person, guess what? You're going to be saving a whole heck of a lot of money.
It's going to be a fraction.
Having the exact same results out of it when all is said and done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, budgets are important for everyone, no matter what your company is. I don't care if you're the biggest, most profitable company in the world. You got that way by thinking about budgets, and it's important to be critical of these events and think about, should it be in person? Should it be virtual? Should it be both? And then most importantly, as we always preach, whether it's, fully in person, fully virtual or hybrid, what am I doing with it to make the most of it once that event ends? Because, you shouldn't waste that opportunity. But that's a whole nother topic for another
How do you
day.
make it live on? Maybe we'll record that one right after this one.
Maybe.
That might be a good idea. Awesome. Well, he is Phil DiMartino. I am Tyler Harmon. We are both from Five Tool Productions. This has been another episode of the Create Smarter podcast. We'll see you next time.